to the Style My Mind podcast. On this show, we decipher the secrets, tips, and guidance of fashion and psychology with the world's most inspiring people. Our mission is to unlock the power to become the best version of yourself by turning their wisdom and knowledge into practical advice. Joining us today as we explore how fashion psychology can empower leadership with our special guest, Jen Thornton. Jen Thornton has over 2 decades of experience in corporate roles, including leadership in large global organizations. She specializes in building innovative talent strategies that drive long-term success, focusing on integrating leadership with the complexities of today's dynamic work environments. Her work revolves around creating workplace cultures where individuals can thrive and organization can exceed their goals. So that sounds like a win-win for me. I am thrilled. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, and thank you for having me on the show today.
I'm grateful that you decided to come on, and I want to dive straight in. Jen, your work has often challenged traditional leadership paradigms, especially when it comes to integrating neuroscience into leadership development. Me as a fashion psychologist, neuroscience is always super interesting. Could you maybe share how that evolved, and can you share how you use these methods to build a successful leadership transformation?
Oh my gosh, that could go on and on. There's so much interesting stuff we could talk about in that area. I think, how I came across it and how it evolved is, as a young leader, working through and growing my career, I just was constantly trying to figure out how to create a team that wanted to get out of bed and do the work every day because, we all have bills. So most of us have to have a job, but, that sense of wanting to actually come and do that. And I knew that created more innovation, more creativity. I knew when I had teams that were engaged, the job was fun and we did better work. And so, that's just kind of how I was stumbling through and figuring things out as a leader. And then late in my career, I really started to research and understand the thought of executive coaching and why coaching was important, and started doing my own kind of self-discovery and self-reflection. I got my own coach and started to really learn that leadership truly is a mental game. And then that kind of stumbled again, how life just, one stop takes you to the next stop. And that next stop for me was actually becoming an executive coach, but then also enhancing that training with my first ever certification in neuroscience, coaching and neuroscience development. And then I was like, oh, now I'm understanding things. And, at the end of the day, there's so many pieces that go into it, but really to get the best out of yourself and to get the best out of someone else, we have to reduce fear so that the part of our brains that are actually innovative and actually excited and fun to come to work, they can function at their best. And, as our fear goes up, as we're in trouble at work or we're scared to say something or someone going to like this idea or hate this idea, all that self-talk that we are always messing with, as that grows, people just don't have access to the part of their brain that does the best work. And so that's kind of where this passion started.
That's super interesting because neuroscience is not something that a lot of people would necessarily maybe connect with leadership or team building in the corporate world, especially not. And for me, it's super, super, super important because our listeners, especially on the social media platforms, they're all yearning for psychological safety at work and having a psychological safe environment, as you just spoke to. So how can leaders foster this in high pressure environments where the stakes are so high?
I think one of the things that leaders can do that's on the surface seems easy, can be more difficult in practice, is start asking questions they don't know the answer to. And most leaders ask questions that they know the answer to, or they have assumptions that they want you to kind of play out. And so when we start asking questions we don't know the answer to, what happens is you're starting really a robust conversation. That could be, hey, I know you brought these 2 recommendations and they seem great. What recommendation did you throw out and why? Because who knows what that would have been. And who
Yeah.
knows, they might, that idea might have been thrown out because they were worried about the cost. Well, is there a way to do that great idea? It's actually the best, but is there a way to figure it out that's cost effective? Like you don't know. You just don't know the answer to that. And I think that's, kind of one of those things we can start to really practice is answering questions we don't know the answer to. And the other thing too is when you disagree with someone on your team, another great way to approach that is just saying, "Hey, I don't agree. I don't see it, but change my mind." Because it is okay to say to someone, "I don't get it. I don't think this is a way we should go." Like we have to be honest with each other in the workplace. But when you say to someone, "But change my mind," and you're open to having your mind changed, again, it's that question you don't know the answer to. You don't know what that person's going to say to you. It really helps you to start to understand how someone's thought process works. It starts to help you understand how they think. In today's world, things are changing so quickly as leaders. We are not as smart as we think we are. I'm just going to be real honest, everyone listening to this. You are not as smart as you think you are. If you have not done that work in 12 to 18 months, you do not know everything about it anymore. Technology and everything just changes. And so it creates this opportunity for us to be in a safe psychological environment because it's about the conversation. It's about the ideas. It's about, sharing and helping each other come up with the best solution or helping each other learn or, saying it's okay that we don't agree, but let's talk it out. And so I think those types of things really start to make a difference at the core level of conversation to build psychological safety.
That's amazing. And that's very true too. If I think about it, the best leaders I had were the ones that were the most introspective and the most eager to learn and grow themselves. They were not the ones that were like, "Oh yeah, I know everything better than you do." They
Yeah.
hire people who close the gap of his expertise.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's so true to just ask questions and also create transparency in things. So thanks so much for sharing that.
Yeah.
You've already spoken to like a lot of movement in the past to today. So I want to ask you, in your experience, how has leadership style evolved over the past decade, especially in the response to the rise of remote work and digital transformation and the pandemic that kind of threw everyone off the rails? How do you think leaders can continue to adapt to the future?
Oh, what's interesting is we're constantly adapting as leaders, and we might not recognize that until we kind of stop and look back, but we are. And if you look at the history of leadership and you look at how social change really drives leadership change. And so, you think about early on, right? So we're talking, maybe late 1800s, early groups, large groups of people. If you were in the military, you were on a farm or in a village, or you had like a little shop that you and your spouse and maybe your child worked together and made bread and pastries. It was all very fresh. It was that. And then the Industrial Revolution hit, and, I'm based here in the US. So that was a big part of change for America was the Industrial Revolution. And that was one of the first times that you had to start thinking about how do you lead groups of people. Well, as that progressed, the oftentimes the owner of the factory was very passionate about profits and their beliefs. And so it wasn't always a great working environment. And so the uprise of unions happened here in the US. And so that changed how we had to lead. And so if you look at times, when women entered the workforce, when we had diversity start to, whether it's religion or race or country of origin, all those different types of change, diversity came into the workplace. It was always driven by social change. And when that social change starts to happen, it changes the way we lead. And so through COVID, one of our biggest social changes was this desire to have flex scheduling, hybrid work schedule, virtual work schedules, all the different types of schedules. And so I think what's really changed is leaders have to be very focused on what they're paying someone for. When everyone worked in the same building, you really paid them to come and sit in a chair from one time to another time and do as much as they could in that hour or those hours. Or oftentimes the person who got there first and the person who left last, and they had the longest working day, was viewed as the best person. It wasn't viewed about their output or their work. It was just, oh, they work so hard. They're always here. And so I think in today's world, you have to say, here's the work I expect to be done. Here's the area, here's the times that I would want to get a hold of you, get the work done. And whatever that means around it, you just do it. But it is a social change that we have to accept and start to get honest with and start paying people for the work and not necessarily where they sit or how many hours they sit in that chair.
Yeah, that's a good point. Valuing output over input is always what I say to
Exactly.
my team members.
Yes, yes.
I always say, as long as you get it done, I don't care how you get it done, get it done.
Get it done. You know when it's due. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and if
always
I
say
can
here,
support you.
yeah, I can support you. I always say we're not chasing deadlines. So I don't want to I don't want to hear from you the first time 5 minutes before it's due, but it's due when it's due.
Exactly. Exactly. I cannot agree more. Yeah, you already spoke to the increasing pace of change also, especially with the last couple of years and the unpredictability of the business world. What strategies, you as a coach, do you recommend for leaders to remain efficient, so getting the output done,
Mhm.
and being resilient while also caring for the team and making sure that everyone is good?
Oh gosh. So I think that there's a couple of things there. When we think about kind of our own mental, I think that as a leader, we have to take care of our own mental resilience, and then we can take care of others. It's, very hard to take care of a team if you're stressed and angry and exhausted and tired and you're lashing out. It's really, really hard to be a great leader. And so we have to take care of ourselves first. And so on that side of it, as an executive coach, one of the basis of everything I do is the idea of, we are oftentimes reactive leaders. How do we become creative leaders? And that reactive means that we set a lot in pleasing or protecting or complying. It can look like, you just tell me what you want. I'm going to do it exactly like you want it. I'm not going to ask questions. I'm not going to tell you, I know this is driving us off a cliff. That's your choice. I just do what I'm told. Because when we're in fear, that's what we do, right? Or distancing, like just hiding from it or being overly critical, trying to count hours over input. All of those things are very reactive. And so to move towards that creative, we have to really start thinking about how do we self-author our own emotions? And so that's that good work. And when you think about self-authoring, the world is going to world. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be stressful. We know way too much because of our phones and all of our alerts and everything. We probably shouldn't know so much. I think it's what stresses us out because we just know too many things. And so all that's coming into you, the way your boss showed up that day, the way your kids left for school that day. I mean, there's just so much happening and the world is just going to world. But you get to choose every day how you want to think about it, what you want to believe about it, how you want to respond to it. And that's the piece that's so important. So when, someone you work with is having a bad day and they kind of take it out on you or they don't seem to understand something, that's them. That is all on them. And you get to decide how you feel about it, how you want to respond, and how you want to hold on to it. And it is okay to just walk out of a meeting and go, that person must be having a bad day. Too bad for them. I had a great day before this meeting. I'm going to have a great day after this meeting, and walk away from the emotions of it. And I think that's some of the biggest work that high performing leaders can do is they have to learn how to self-author. Because if you are in a high stress, high level position, you're making hard decisions. You're making difficult decisions. There is an inherent amount of stress to it. If you cannot self-author and you add all of the world doing the world things to you, it's going to be hard. And I think self-authoring leaders, then when their team comes to them with problems, they can show more empathy because they themselves are not exhausted. They are not burned out with empathy, and they can start to help their team be more self-authoring, and it starts to go and create this cycle of high functioning teams that self-author throughout the day.
I love that. I was always like, before I stepped into a leadership role, for me, it was personally always like, oh yeah, I have a very high drive of getting stuff done. So almost on the border of burning out.
Mhm.
And when I started to step into like a leadership role, didn't even have to be like the title. It was literally just like a thought leader in a group. It was so hard because I had to actually start to embrace this saying of like, you cannot pour from an empty cup. And I think
Mhm.
that fits really well. Although actually a friend of mine last we talked about, she actually said something different. She said, you should probably rephrase it to you cannot pour from an empty cup, but you cannot pour from an empty kettle. Because when
Oh.
you pour from an empty cup, the cup is just empty. There's no harm in it. It's just
Mhm.
empty. But if you pour from a boiling empty kettle, you burn the kettle through. So
Yeah.
that was such a interesting way of picturizing a situation that just makes it very clear you have to always take care of yourself first, and then you can take care of others. So I appreciate all of your advice. Thank you so much. And that made me think of that immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're so right. It is. It's really hard to get up every day and lead teams. An emotional activity. If you don't have emotions to it, it'd be really hard to do anything or get anything done. And so understanding how to control your own thoughts, your own beliefs, having this sense of I know how I value myself. It doesn't have anything to do with anyone else that is walking down the street that day. It's really empowering too. Like it's great. I mean, I just helped a client and her boss was having a really bad day and she turned in some work, and she's like my client, super high performing. And her, chief officer said to her, hey, I'm disappointed in this work. And that's all the email said. And she didn't even know where to go with that. She was like, I don't even know where to go with this. And I'm like, where you go with it is you get curious on what work isn't up to standard. And, come to find out after a conversation, the supervisor was having a bad day and didn't understand a piece of it. And so she just like stopped thinking about it at all. Like she just, but the client could have like, done all different types of mental stuff around that. And I said, you just don't know. If you don't know, have a conversation. And through a very quick conversation, everything was fine. No longer disappointed. They were just not informed. And I think those are the types of examples, if you can't self author, will derail you.
Yeah. Yeah. Self-authoring. That's every listener needs to take that away from this podcast at least.
Yeah. I hope
Check
so.
internally when
Yeah.
you go to work and talk. Yeah. Also raise concerns if you have any or you have uncertainty, just talk about it. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Um, as you well know, this podcast is a fashion psychology podcast. So we're also looking into leadership presence and how people present themselves and first impressions and all of the above and many, many more. As someone with a deep understanding of leadership, how do you perceive the role of appearance and attire in shaping leadership presence? Do you think fashion psychology plays a significant role in influencing how leaders are perceived? Yeah. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's such a good question. What I'd like to say and what I think is true are two different things. What I would like to say is no. What I believe is true is yes. When look at the neuroscience of humans, when someone looks at someone they do not know, they start unconsciously making decisions about this person. It is how we are built. Like it, from the caveman days, dinosaur, not like me. I should probably run. Other human like me. How's your day? Like it helps us, stay alive, that fear of something that's different from us. And so we have to know that that's in all of us, which helps us when we know that we can start to be more open-minded. We can be more curious. We're less likely to judge someone on appearance. But absolutely, it starts to play in. And it does make a difference, unfortunately, probably more for females. I just, again, what I like to say and what I think is true, two different things. What I'd like to say is, I wish that females could come to work every day in like the same uniform. You look at, I always teach people to remove decisions because decision fatigue's a real thing. So you look at someone like Steve Jobs always wore the black shirt and pants. always, every day. It was a decision he didn't have to make, and he understood the power of removing decisions. As females, if we did that, people would be like, "Why doesn't she ever do anything to herself?" So I do think it plays in. I think that we don't have to protect our age. We shouldn't have to protect our hair color. We shouldn't have to protect weight, or any of those things. But just know that an environment has visual expectations, know what they are, and make decisions that are best for you on what you do with that information.
That's true. And also, I always like to flip it from the other perspective as well. So you've spoken about like the receiving end of the impression, but
Mhm.
also the yeah, sending aspect of the impression. I think a lot of people are also drifting away from wanting to fit into certain norms or
Mhm.
adhere to certain dress codes, especially since many organizations are relaxing dress codes now, or with hybrid and remote work. You have to pretty much only dress up the upper half of your body
Yeah.
relatively, and even that
Mhm.
got relaxed. But there's so much to fashion psychology when it comes to expressing who you are and wanting maybe to express a certain amount of authority. And
Mhm.
especially women still struggling to step in higher ranking leadership positions in many, many industries.
Yeah.
I see there is a massive importance, unfortunately, because it puts more
Mhm.
thinking and decisioning strain on us.
Yes, it
But
does.
yeah, it's quite tough. And we talked in a prior podcast about how a certain dress code or relaxing certain dress codes is actually a privilege that many people don't have because they
Mhm.
have to adhere or have to prove themselves right or whatever. So that's the 2 cents that I want to bring into that conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, as we've spoken about like relaxing organizations, relaxing dress codes, how do you think that impacts leadership authenticity? Not authority, but authenticity.
Yeah, so I think that you can, find a way to bring your own personality into it. I was working out with a friend the other day, shopping because I do love to shop. And she'd taken on a new role, and it's a clothing retailer. And so they have a very specific look, but the look just wasn't her. And so over lunch, we talked about how, she needs to have the look. She's an executive. She's got to have the look of the brand. It is what it is. But then we talked about, okay, well, how do we kind of adjust it so it does feel like you? And so we kind of played with some ideas, and we went shopping, and she got a couple of pieces so that she still is very brand appropriate, because she's still her. And that first day after that weekend back, she sent me a picture. She's like, I just got out of this very important meeting, and look what I was wearing. And so I just, it goes back to that. She felt good when she went into the meeting. She was representing the brand, but in a way that made her feel confident. And I think that's how it is. You just sometimes have to get a little creative.
Also, like what you've spoken to before now, that kind of links back into my next question. So she has felt better. She has felt very confident and positive. That must have had an impact on the people that she works with in her team or that she leads, right?
Yeah, absolutely. When we feel good, we do good things. And that is just kind of normal and how it works.
So yeah, at least that if you have to adhere to dress codes, make sure that you dress up in a way that it makes you still best confident, and that will make you automatically a better leader because you
Yeah.
are going to feel better. That's
Yeah.
amazing. That's
Mhm.
fantastic
Yeah.
intersection here.
Yeah. And just that creativity of it. And I think that's what we go, oh, here's the rules. And we're like, but what's inside those rules? I always say there's always guardrails, but you maybe can pick the color or the different ways you want to do it. And that's what I would say is know what the guardrails are, but be you inside of them.
Yeah, you already took almost away my question that I had for you
Oh no.
prepared. I'm asking anyway because maybe you have a bit more to say to it. Given your focus on innovative leadership and
Mhm.
focusing on creativity and things as such, how do you see the interplay between a leader's personal style and their ability to foster creativity and resilience within their team?
Ooh, good question. I think that, when you think about style and when you get up and be you, then you're actually reserving energy. It takes energy to be creative, to be innovative. You have to have a lot of energy to do that. And so when you start to think about wasting energy in the morning of like, ugh, I don't want to wear this, or I don't want to, I just feel like I'm like, cosplaying, like, ugh, like, right? You've used energy that you will not be able to use to innovate. And so I think that's a huge piece of it is, when you get to be yourself and get to be authentic to who you are, then it gives you energy. It doesn't zap your energy, and you have more energy then to go and have creative conversations, exciting conversations, and start to think about what's possible.
Love this conversation, and I love what you're bringing here. It's just bangers all the way.
Thank
Fantastic.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Speaking of energy, I'm as an example, as many people won't believe me if I say this out loud, but it's true. I'm an introvert. So when it comes to energy preserving, I have to put a lot of effort in it, especially if I'm in the corporate with a lot of people around me all the time. It actually takes a lot of energy away from me, and I want to come home and just want to disappear. So having an additional strain of energy removed from me is actually quite detrimental because it takes so much to just get through the day and then do all of the good things that I want to be doing. So how do you think, is there an approach where people can find a balance that are more introverted leaning, that have to maybe be on premise all day, every day? How they can preserve their energy, how they can, yeah, live their best life also at work and have a good balance there.
So I am an introvert too. So I feel you. I since I grew up in operations and then moved to HR, I was a remote HR person before remote was even a thing. So I didn't ever really work in an office really much at all. Like I would go into like a corporate office that week, but I mean, I had to go in early in the morning and work, and then I couldn't do anything all day because there was just too much. And then I stayed late and finished my day. Though back then it was before, COVID and remote, they thought I should be working between these 2 hours and I couldn't physically. My brain couldn't do it. So I would work on the ends. But, I think it's about, when you're someone who wants to guard your energy, know what zaps your energy. There could be extroverts who need a lot of sleep. There could be, know what it is and protect it and be honest with it. I know that at the end of the day, I don't have a lot of words left. And my very best friend, she is a extrovert. Whew, and she's got a lot of words, but over the years, she's learned I don't. And so, if at the end of the day, when she usually calls, she will either text and say, "Do you have any words left?" Or if it doesn't matter, she's got to get something out. She'll call me and say, "I don't know what your word count is left for the day, but if you could just listen, that'd be great." And I'm like, "Okay, I can listen. I just can't respond." And so really talking to people and knowing what that is. But yeah, it cracks me up because I get a text every day. "Do you have any words left?" And I can say yes or a little or no. And I can say no. And she's like, "Okay." Because again, it's not about her. She knows that. She's self-author. She respects that. So just find, what it is that zaps your energy. For me, it's word count. For someone else, it could be sleep. For someone else, it could be staying on a really strict eating schedule, or an exercise schedule. Like everyone has that thing that protects their energy, whether you're introvert or an extrovert. Know what it is, protect it so that you do have the energy you need to spend it in the right places.
That's great advice. Thank you so much. I also want to touch upon now, because you've discussed that from like a normal working perspective, but coming back to, if you are a leader and you have these energy restraints, how can you support your team members that you have under you in hierarchical levels potentially? How can you support them? What are innovative approaches that you can find a balance by keeping them engaged without feeling disengaged because you are running out of words, so to speak?
Yeah. It's a matter of words for the day. So, my team, everyone on my team knows that about me, and I know what zaps all of them. And so I think what's amazing is when you have a group of people who understands what gives energy to someone and what depletes energy from someone, and the team knows that, and the team respects it. Now, there are some days it doesn't matter if I'm out of words. I still got to use them. I get that. But if we understand that about each other, then it makes a difference. I have someone on my team that is incredibly creative, and she's such a little daredevil. I couldn't do half the stuff that she does, like, well, probably 99% of it, but she needs to be outside. She needs to be on her mountain bike. She needs to be climbing a mountain. She needs to be doing something like physically outside. And so sometimes we'll be working and I'm like, you seem like you need to go outside. And she's like, I haven't done this or that. And I'm like, hey, this deadline's 3 days from now. Like, take the rest of the afternoon and go kayaking. And then, because I know tomorrow you'll know all the right things, it'll happen. But like, stop forcing it, go kayak and come back. And so, those are the types of things when a team understands each other that you can support each other and do it. Now, are there times that she'd rather be kayaking, but we have a deadline? Yep. And we figure it out, we muscle through it. But if doesn't have to be that way, then it doesn't have to be that way. And so I think it's about respect and acknowledgement about everyone's needs.
And knowing people a bit more personal as well. I feel like sometimes in the big corporations, especially when it's getting very complicated and matrixed, it's like so tough because, you might be just an employee number to someone. It's not necessarily even a name popping up or how they look or whatever. So that's fair. You need to know your team members and you need to know them well. And they need to be comfortable also to open up and speak to it. Or also if she feels like, hey, I'm actually hitting a wall here, I need to get out on the bike or whatever, or kayaking, she needs to feel safe enough, and she does, to come to you, which is good advice for leaders and employees to make sure that they can find the right balance there. A little bit off that now, you often talk about the talent cliff. Can you maybe explain what that is for the listeners, and how can leaders ensure they are building a bench of skilled workers and skilled individuals ready for leadership, especially in the rapidly growing global organizations?
So the talent cliff came to me just randomly kind of talking with a client. And so what happens way, way too often is that when a fast growing company is taking off, they really focus on the service, the widget, whatever it is, right? If it's taken off, we got to protect it. We got to scale it. We got to do this. We got to do that. There's all this conversation about the service or the product, whatever it is. What we don't take the time to say is, wow, we are really taking off. And 5 years from now, we're projected to be here. And so, we have a business plan, a financial plan, a manufacturing plan. We have all these plans to get there. But very rarely do we have what's called a talent plan that says, hey, my head of marketing is handling this at 10 million. Will they be able to do this job at 100 million? Well, what's the gaps in those two things? And so if you don't put together a talent plan that supports your business plan, what happens is eventually the what it takes to run that business is more than the skills of the people actually doing it. And the business outgrows the people. And then when that happens, leaders get frustrated. They are, reactive, the fear sets in, and we're not as kind to each other. We're not as creative. We start protecting. We start doing a lot of different things. But what we're not doing is really saying, hey, we developed the talent. And when that happens, your best people are going to leave because they don't want to be around the drama. Your people that are just like, well, I can't really find another job, or I just don't really want to. They're going to stick around. And they're, not necessarily driving the innovation or driving the development. And then right after your talent goes off the cliff, your business is right behind it. But it is this idea that if you do not have a talent plan that supports your business plan and your finance plan, because you always have a finance plan with your business plan, if you don't have the talent plan, then eventually it'll catch up with you.
That's a very interesting component, especially for the young entrepreneurs. I have a few young brands also that we're talking about, or I have a friend who is also a young entrepreneur with a startup, and she is starting to look into hiring people now. So I'm actually sent her that specific aspect of this podcast because that is very, very valuable. A talent plan. That's also something I have not heard of in that capacity yet. So thank you so much for bringing that to my attention.
Yeah. When you think about high performing leaders, one hand is their money and the other hand is their talent, because no business gets anything done without strong talent and strong finances. That's just life. And for some reason, throughout the world, we have never said, with our business plan and our financial plan and our manufacturing plan and all these plans, I'm going to have a talent development plan too. And it's the missing piece that so many people get themselves in trouble with.
Yeah, that's very true. You've spoken just now, we've discussed partially already the navigation of leadership challenges a little bit.
Mhm.
And you have also on your podcast mentioned the importance of challenging the status quo, especially in your career. Can you share maybe a specific leadership crisis that you have either witnessed or have been in it yourself, where pushing back against traditional methods led actually to a breakthrough?
Oh my gosh, let me think about that. So absolutely. I think that, I always kid around that I now get paid to do what I used to get in trouble for. And so as a consultant, I am paid to be honest. As an employee, I was not. I got called into the principal's office quite a bit as an employee because I always thought we should just be honest. Like I didn't know why that would be a problem, but it was a problem often. And so I think that I can't think of an exact, I could think of them. I have to be careful what I could share out in the world, but that's just the general theme, is that to challenge anything, you have to have the courage to be honest. And the person that's being challenged, for it to be productive, they have to be comfortable with seeing things in a different way. It's going back to that, hey, I don't see it, but change my mind. I don't believe that's true, but why do you believe it's true? And it goes back to being able to be self-authoring and comfortable in a conversation, to be strong in your convictions and have something to back it up. You got to have some reason. You have to have some research. You have to have some facts. You can't just pull crazy ideas out of the whatever. But you want to start to think about what's not being said in the room and be comfortable saying it. And also be comfortable hearing it, because that's when challenges drive business. That's when challenges make environments and cultures better. It's where innovation happens. But yeah, be okay saying the thing that no one else is willing to say.
So now I have the big question for the people who are maybe a bit afraid, considering that they might not be in a psychological safe environment. Where do you find the courage to do it?
Good question. It can be hard. And I think there's levels of it. And so, if you think of what needs to be said on a spectrum of 0 to 100, it may not be the moment to say the 100, but it may be a moment to say, could we pause and talk about this more? Or I have a couple of questions about the execution of this. Like, I love this plan, but could we practice how it plays out in real life? Like, let's just talk about, if we make this great decision, and you're like, it's not great. But you're like, we make this great decision. Let's talk about how that might do this, or what's that, or what's our unintended consequences. And so there's ways to start to kind of lean into it, so that you can test the waters. And there are some days where, yeah, it's not going to happen. But when you look back into organizations that have failed or had something that's catastrophic happen, when you go back and you look into that, so often there's someone that says, oh, I knew that wouldn't work, but I didn't want to say anything. And that happens so often.
That's good advice. It's really tough. And you also don't want to be the know-it-all, but you kind of also, if you believe in what the business is doing, or you want to grow also in your business, you might just have to just be brave and just do it. So thank you so much for that advice. If you could give one piece of advice to someone aspiring to take on leadership, might be in a group, might be in an actual leadership role that you're getting paid for doing. what would it be? How can they prepare themselves for the complexities that leadership in today's world is coming with?
There's so much someone could do, but if I had to boil it down to one thing, is know what your values are. Write a story about who you are as a leader. And you can do this at any point. You can do this before you become a leader. You could do this 2 years in, 4 years in, 30 years in. Write a story about you as a leader. Talk about what you're doing. Talk about what kind of conversations you're having. What do people think about you? What do you accomplish? And so if you sit down and write a story about yourself as if you're watching yourself leading, write that story and then become that story.
I have goosebumps actually here to everyone listening. That's such fantastic advice. Yeah, be the leader you want to be. Looking back on you, how has your leadership style evolved, as you mentioned, from traditional corporate roles to founding your own coaching practice? What have been the key turning points in your journey?
That's an easy one to answer because I have so much clarity around it, and that is perfectionism. Perfectionism is a tool of fear. And I grew up in a industry that perfectionism, we had a book that had a rule for everything, like exactly how many inches this size dot should be from this point to this point. And man, if the rules said it, then by gosh, I was going to do it. My whole team was going to do it. There was no questions. We were all going to be perfect. But what happened in that is, yeah, I had great business. I did great. But looking back on it, what I know is I could have been better. I could have had better business. I wasn't willing to take a risk because the risks were not in the manual at all. And I could only follow the manual. And it worked for me for a lot of years. And then I got to a place where my peers were all getting promoted and I wasn't. And I couldn't understand it because I was doing everything right. And so my brain couldn't comprehend why I wasn't getting promoted. And so I, I stayed at the same company, but I went in a different direction. I went into HR, which was amazing because I didn't know anything about it other than I was really good at leading people. So I ended up over at HR. But what that taught me was that I had to learn a new job and mid-career. And it taught me that it was okay not to be perfect. And I started being a little bit more brave. I had a leader that was like, just make a decision. If it's not the right one, we'll talk about later, but don't sit around and wait for me. And so I had to get really used to that. And then, starting my own business, I didn't know anything about that. I don't know what possessed me to think that was a good idea one day, but I did. And it's been fantastic. And I am so grateful to myself for doing it. I think I was just too tired to look for a job. I think that's why I did it. But it was great. It was a good decision. But that is, when I look back on my traditional corporate career, what held me back from doing what I know I could have done was that I was so stuck into doing things perfect that I couldn't see what was possible and I couldn't innovate. And so, yeah, I have a lot of clarity around that and I'm thankful for that clarity.
Additionally to that takeaway of listening to you is that pivoting can be daunting, but it's actually super empowering and exhilarating in whatever you want to do.
Yeah, it
So
is.
fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
I know time is running past very quickly. I'm very sad because I'm really enjoying this conversation.
Me too.
But
I'm having a good time.
I'm glad. I'm very glad. That's always what I want for the guests here, that they're having a good time. So, what is the key message and advice you want listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Oh, what I'd like you to take away from today is to spend some time getting to know yourself, know your values, know who you want to be, really practice some authoring so you can be that. And whoever you are is perfect. There is something great for you out there, that there is something great for every single person in the world. I do believe that. But the only way to find out what that is or to get the most out of it, if you're already there, if you want to get the most out of it, just really spend time being honest with who you are and self-authoring through the day so that you can be who you are.
Thank you so much, Jen, for sharing your insights and experience with us today. I cannot be more grateful. Now, we do have a closing tradition in this podcast that every episode we challenge our listeners, which facilitates growth, intentionality, and awareness. Given your focus on innovative leadership and personal growth, what is your Style My Mind challenge with which you would encourage your listeners to take on this week to, do anything?
So, I know you do this because I've listened to your podcast. So, I was like, oh, the pressure is on. And I really thought about just what that could be. And one of the things that I have noticed recently among people I know is they're very excited through some of these new websites where it kind of cuts out the first, second, third, and fourth person. And so you kind of go directly to the factory. And so you're getting incredible pricing and pricing that feels a little too good to be true. And people are excited. And not only are they buying too much, I mean, that we understand, like all of us buy too much, but what they're not really recognizing that if it is at that price, chances are the people doing the work may not be of an age that should do the work, may not have a working environment that is healthy and fair. And to just really ask yourself as you are buying things, really thinking about, do I know how this was created? What was going on in that factory? And doing your best. I mean, I know we're each just one person and, that factory is going to go on, but if all of us do it, we will make a difference. Just, be very careful and make sure that your dollar isn't going to a place that isn't healthy for its employees.
Yeah. And it will also make you feel better, to be fair. Yeah. And that will increase your positive leadership style. So here you go.
That's right. And it's a great way to show empathy towards someone you don't know. And I think that's such a gift to show empathy towards someone that you don't know.
I agree. Thank you so much for that challenge. That's fantastic. So, Jen, where can our listeners find you, your work, as well as learn just more about what you do?
So a couple different ways. Love to connect with you on LinkedIn, and it's Jen Thornton, ACC on LinkedIn. I have a podcast, Let's Fix Leadership, that you can find on any of our podcast channels. And then our website is 304coaching.com.
Fantastic. I will also put all of that into the info box that everyone can, with one click, just get to the place where they want to get. So thanks. Fantastic. Thank you again, Jen, for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It was so much fun to talk with you today.
Thank you. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, and share, and do all of those beautiful things. Follow us on all of our social media channels. Visit our website for more insightful content. Always keep your head held high, embrace your journey to professional and personal development, and be open to styling your mind. Thank you so much.